So we will do this by providing techniques, tips, and tricks to help you and your patients transition from a lower nutrient dense to a higher nutrient dense dietary pattern. To make it practical for our busy lives, Allie and I will explain and demonstrate how to cross-utilize meal components and to increase nutrient density while reducing preparation and cooking time through your week. And I will include examples that I have used in the clinical setting to provide context as you work to include all of this information in your patient visits or with your patients. Next slide, please. And here is Allie, and I thank Carrie for giving us both a lovely introduction. So we will move past Allie, and the next slide is myself, and move on to the next slide, please. We have no conflicts of interest. Next slide. Okay, so nutrient density identifies the amount of beneficial nutrients in a food product in proportion to the energy content of the food. So basically, nutrient-dense foods supply relatively more nutrients than calories. The beneficial nutrients that we're looking for are protein, dietary fiber, and a variety of vitamins and minerals. On the flip side, calorie-dense foods are high in calories and low in nutrients. And the components we look to limit include added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium in general, of course. Okay, next slide, slide 7. So the standard American diet is energy rich and nutrient poor generally. As a result, dietitians, doctors, health coaches, and many other health professionals can use the concept of nutrient density to guide patients toward a more healthy diet and try to reduce disease incidence. The dietary guidelines recommend that we do this work in this way, and we'll talk a little bit more about the dietary guidelines in just a moment. So what kinds of foods would be considered nutrient dense? It would be the foods such as vegetables, fruits, whole grain, seafood, eggs, legumes, nuts and seeds, low-fat dairy, and lean meats and poultry. Okay, next slide, please. So nutrient profiling is a science of ranking or classifying foods based on the nutrients they contain. There are several nutrient density profiling tools. Some are designed to be used by health professionals, and some are designed to be used by consumers. Nutrient profile models calculate the contents of key nutrients per either 100 grams or 100 calories or the serving size of the food. For maximum effectiveness, the nutrient profile models need to be transparent, based on publicly accessible nutrient data, and also validated against independent measures of a healthy diet. There are many nutrient density profiling tools, and I listed a few of them, but you may see reference to them in various ways if you go looking for evidence for nutrient dense foods. Okay, next slide, please. So the whole reason we're talking about nutrient density is to try to limit disease. Although there is research linking food and health, the healthy eating index still remains low. But interestingly, it is generally higher earlier in life and declines over time. Next slide. So the updated dietary guidelines do recommend a focus on nutrient-dense foods. Some interesting components of the dietary guidelines are that they do recognize that the healthy eating index showed that nutrient-dense dietary patterns decrease over time. So one of the goals, the stated goals, is to help patients consider meeting all of their calorie and nutrition needs with nutrient-dense foods throughout every stage of their life. And when discussing or thinking or working or researching about or talking to your patients about nutrient-dense food options, we want to be sure to work with their personal preferences, cultural traditions, budget, stress, home environment, and so on. We want to work to help our patients identify and choose nutrient-dense choices, and also, of course, limit energy-dense foods. While plant foods are easy to identify, many of the foods that we eat as Americans are processed. As Marianne Nessel discussed on Friday, many of these foods are ultra-processed. So how can we identify a nutrient-dense food if it isn't a vegetable or a fruit? Next slide, please. So the nutrient facts label. One of the ways that we can identify a nutrient facts label is to look and see what, identify a nutrient dense food is to look at the nutrient facts label. What's interesting about this label is that a lot of the things we want to avoid are at the top. So we'll first look at, just to run through it, at the very top, it says how many servings are per container and how much is a serving size, so that you can easily see if you're having a cup of something, but there's 4 servings of this cup in the whole package. If you eat the whole package, you have to multiply all of these components by 4 to really find out what you're eating. And many of you may know this and may be familiar with it. Some of you may not, but I find in my clinical practice that I have explained the nutrition facts label nearly every day, because it's not part of any standard education that most people have, and they don't really know how to read a nutrition facts label. So it's really important to get familiar with it, be able to explain it to your patients if you want them to reduce their sodium or make sure they're getting adequate calcium. So as we go down this nutrition facts label, we see the total fat, and right up under that is the amount of saturated fat and also the amount of trans fat. And we know that we want saturated fat to be less than 10% of our daily calories. But really, how many of our patients know how many calories they're really supposed to be aiming for? So this is going to start a conversation. Once the patient knows around a range of how many calories they should be eating per day to reach whatever goal they have, about 10% of their calories should be from saturated fat. And for the trans fat, it should be as close to 0 as possible. It really should be 0. As we know, trans fats raise our LDL and lower our HDL. So it is one of the worst components of our food supply. We want to get it as close to 0 as we can. Moving down the list, sodium was one of the nutrients that I had described as wanting to be limited if we're looking for nutrient dense items. So for many people, they're aiming for 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. Some people may be aiming for 2,000, 1,800, even 1,500 milligrams per day. That really depends on their personal medical history. Most patients don't know how much sodium they're supposed to be getting. So giving them that knowledge and then helping them to identify how this product that they're choosing is going to fit into their overall totals. Moving down to fiber, right? This is one of the things we talk about so much in our clinic and also in culinary medicine, is how much fiber and how to get enough fiber. And so for adult women, they're usually aiming for somewhere between 21 and 25 grams per day. Adult men, 30 to 38 grams per day. So as a general easy rule of thumb, you think 25 to 30 grams a day for adults. That means they're looking for about 5 grams of fiber per snack and about 10 grams of fiber per meal. So if they're looking at a packaged item, they could really start to get an idea as if they're going to be hitting the goal for that meal or snack. Moving on to the sugars. And I know I'm spending a lot of time on this label, but this is, since we do eat so many packaged items, it's really important for our patients to be able to identify what is in their packaged item. So for sugars, this is a new component of the nutrition facts label. This was not on the previous nutrition facts label from a few years ago. They've included added sugars, and that is really helpful. For women, we're supposed to limit to about 6 teaspoons per day, which translates to 24 grams and about 100 calories. For men, we're supposed to limit to about 9 teaspoons per day, which is 36 grams and about 150 calories per day. of added sugars, right? So this is, no, we're not talking about the sugar that's in a peach, right? We're talking about the sugar that's added to your can of soda. Okay, and then moving on to protein, you could see how much protein is in there. I'm not going to get into how much protein each person needs, but this is a quick review of the nutrition facts label, so you could help your patients identify what they're eating when we're not eating a food that is fresh produce. There are some packaged foods that do have front of package labeling, and those can be kind of confusing. There's no real national standard for this. There's a wide variety of what is printed on the front of a label, and many labels are really just confusing. I can't tell you how often I answer questions about multigrain versus whole grain. We'll talk about that in a few slides. So clinically, I really do help patients read a nutrition label. And I do recommend, if you will be talking with your patients about what to choose, that you have a package or even just a printed out explanation of a nutrition label that you can share. Okay, slide 12, next slide, please. So if we are not looking at nutrition labels and just thinking about foods and snacks, how do we identify what is nutrient dense and what is not? So here we have on the left, the apple with peanut butter versus apple juice versus a Snickers bar. The apple with peanut butter is larger in volume than the Snickers bar, has more fiber and 100 calories less. So it is nutrient dense in just looking at what is involved in it compared to its weight. While it also will keep you full for a long time and be healthier for you with all of the other nutrients that are in it. While the apple juice is lower in calories, while the apple juice is a little bit lower in calories than the apple with peanut butter, it is much lower in fiber and no protein and higher in sugar. So this is nutrient poor. It also is not going to keep you full very long because there's no fiber or protein to keep it in your system to give you that satiating feeling. So I like to explain this concept of a piece of whole fruit plus a heart healthy fat is going to be healthier and keep you fuller for longer than juice or a candy bar. Here's a next slide is another group of examples of how to explain this to your patients. And here at the top, we have a comparison of nutrient dense items with similar foods that might be more typical of the standard American diet at the bottom. So here we have at the top, if your patient is considering cereal, right? You have the bottom, which is the frosted shredded wheat. But if you just take out that added sugar, you're left with a whole grain in plain shredded wheat, and you could add fruit to give it sweetness and other flavor. The next one over is a comparison of yogurt, and the yogurt aisle, I don't know if you all feel this way as well, it's become a wall in my grocery store, and a lot of it has so much sugar, it feels like it's candy. So how do you steer your patients towards a healthier option? So you're looking for the plain low-fat yogurt and then adding your own fruit versus the yogurt that has the fruit at the bottom or other mix-ins available that will have a lot more added sugar. When you're looking for something like beans, there could be a pretty good variety of what you choose based on the sodium count. If you choose the low sodium or no sodium ones, it's at the bottom, or it's at the top. Or if you look at the bottom, it's the regular canned beans that will have plenty of sodium in them. One way that you can help if you do happen to have a can of regular traditional beans is to rinse them very, very, very well. It will get a lot of the sodium out. Again, if you're moving on towards cooking, which we'll be talking about very soon, butter has a lot of saturated fat. The better choice would be cooking with olive oil. And finally, when you're making a beverage choice, you want to avoid the one with a lot of added sugar. So avoiding the soda and instead going with a sparkling water. You could always add your own flavor to it through lemon or lime or herbs, something like that. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So how do we increase the nutrient density besides looking at the nutrient label and picking, individual items? How do we have a general concept for doing this? So a bunch of the ways are here. So you want to increase vegetables of all different kinds. Think of the rainbow. You're trying to reach eating the rainbow as often as is practical for your life, for your family, for the number of people in your home. But you want to think about adding dark green vegetables, red and orange, legumes in the way of beans and peas and lentils, and other even starchy vegetables. And how can you add them? We'll be talking about that in a moment. Adding fruits, especially whole fruit. Think of having them for snacks or adding them to breakfast, lunch, even dressings. I do want to just take a note and say I appreciate these questions, and I will be very excited to be answering them as we're cooking. There'll be moments when Allie will be doing something and I'll be able to answer your questions. So definitely keep them coming. I see them and I look forward to answering them. So thank you. So when you're looking for nutrient-dense protein foods, you're looking for lean meats, poultry and eggs, seafood, legumes, nuts and seeds, and soy products. And of course, oils in the form of heart-healthy options like seafood and nuts. Excuse me. And so how do we want to limit our the things that make our foods less nutrient dense? So for the added sugars, we're looking for less than 10% of calories per day starting at age 2. I gave a different reference number for that, and I'll talk about where I got that from. We really want to avoid foods and beverages with added sugars for children younger than age 2. For saturated fat, we're looking at less than 10% of the calories per day starting at age 2. Sodium, less than 2,300 milligrams. And for alcoholic beverages, we're looking for no more than 1 drink for women and 2 drinks per men per day. Okay, next slide, please. So how do we shift towards nutrient options as we're describing them with our patients? So the first is to think about, as you're helping your patients progress from where they are to where they're going, you want to meet them where they are and consider, as you're giving them ideas and talking with them about them generating their own ideas, to think of good, better, and best. Which is, if you have a patient with a standard American diet and is drinking soda and sweetened drinks all day long and eating a lot of ultra processed foods and takeout, are you going to present the totally cleaned up version of all of that and expect this patient to just make all these huge transitional changes all at once? That's not likely to leave your patient with success. So what might be better is to pick what we might call the low-hanging fruit. Present to them, your patients, the concepts of nutrient density and explain why that could help them achieve whatever nutrition goal that they have based on their medical history. And then ask them what changes might be easiest for them. Some patients are happy to look at that and pick for themselves, and that is having your patient take that agency is much more likely to add up to results for them. So if they're not able or not sure what to do, then you could always, coach them towards picking. But you want to start with what is a good change. And then from that, they build success. And then they can make the next change and the next change. The dietary pattern would not likely to be changed overnight, but making progress is progress. So ideas might include transitioning from sugary beverages, reducing store-bought sauces and dressings to making their own, and switching from refined grains to whole grains. Also, some of the other things that we'll be talking through are making a meal plan and understanding how to cross-utilize ingredients, being thoughtful about portion sizes, learning how to cook to add interesting flavor, and on and on. We will be going through each of these in the next few slides. So I will go to the next slide, please. Okay, so meal planning and cross-utilization is where the rubber meets the road. It's where we're getting into the weeds here. And you can see I'm getting a little excited because I get to talk about how to actually implement all of these things that we're talking about. So these are the practical tips for helping you and your patients achieve your goals. So in meal planning, you and your patients may begin with all of your meals for a week. You may begin, you're ready to dive in, you want to make a plan for 21 days, or you may decide, you know what, I'm going to start with dinners. Let me plan my dinners. Wherever you start is the right place, as long as you're making positive changes. So you make your meal plan beginning, let's say, with your dinners, and think about designing the meals so that components can be used multiple times per week. This makes it easier, a little bit less cooking, reduces the chance for food waste. And so some examples of this is meal 1 might be roasting chicken thighs with root vegetables. Meal 2 is using that chicken, pulling the chicken and adding some other components to make a pulled chicken sandwich. And then finally, you might take the leftover pulled chicken and roasted vegetables and putting them into a soup. Next slide, please. So when patients are learning to, take the processed or ultra processed foods out of their diet and starting to cook, we want to help them make sure that they pick things and learn things that are going to be delicious so that they'll stick with it. And so there's so many cooking methods, and we may not always think of them, and our patients may not always think of them. So thinking through what cooking method might work for the actual item that you're cooking would be really interesting. So for example, we'll be talking about carrots and carrot tops. And how do you make those carrot tops interesting for the food you're making? And we'll be talking about blanching those and how that will be used. So that'll be a fun part of thinking about how you can use different cooking methods to increase your nutrient density. Also, remember, you don't have to cook everything. You could play with raw ingredients, especially with foods you may not have thought of before. I don't know how many of you have tried raw beets in a salad, but we'll be talking about that soon, and I happen to love it. Next slide, please. So how do you build towards flavor? So you want to add flavor as often as you can. When we're shifting towards nutrient-dense items, we might be taking out sodium and fat. Sodium, people are very used to very salty things, and fat does bring the flavor. And so if you're taking some of that out, what do you do next? How do you not have a bland dish, right? You have to think about, and your patients have to think about adding flavor back through the world of herbs and spices. It's really exciting to find fresh or dried spices that have been unknown before, or may have been hidden behind the sugar, salt, and fat. When you're looking to add new flavors, think about toasting a spice before you use it, or creating your own spice blend. I happen to love pureeing roasted vegetables and using them as a condiment for a sandwich. Next slide, please. So building flavor also includes using stocks and sauces. One of my favorite things I've pulled from Carrie's teaching is the treasure pile. So when you're cooking and you have scraps, are they trash or are they treasure? Well, the treasure ones are the leftover onion bits and some onion skins and garlic and chives and carrot bits, onions, and so on, that you can save to create your own veggie stock. So if you're transitioning from that packaged rice dish to one with much less sodium, but you're looking for flavor, how do you do that? One very easy way is to saute up some garlic and onion, toast the grain in there, and then add your own veggie stock that has no sodium. And you really have built so much flavor that is not relying on sodium. Next slide, please. Okay, so another obvious way to increase nutrient density is to literally put more fruits and vegetables into the diet. And when you're creating a plan that's going to cross-utilize your produce, you're much less likely to waste it. So you make the plan, you buy what you need, and then you use it in multiple ways. So if you're going to buy a bunch of beautiful looking beets, think of how many different ways you can use it once you've roasted it. And that way you really get the most out of your product. It's not wasted, and you're not cooking over and over again. Next slide, please. So how can you include more fruit in your meal? Obviously, you can top your cereal or your yogurt with some bananas or apples, or we're getting into the beautiful summer fruits, so all of those beautiful stone fruits. Um, you can think about using your fruit at dinner. Maybe make a fruit salsa on top of some simple grilled chicken or fish, or add fruit to your salad. You could blend fruit into salad dressing. Or one of my personal favorites is, as all those stone fruits really come into season, is grilling them for a nutritious and very nutrient dense dessert. There's nothing like grilled peaches or nectarines in the summer. Also, you could take fruit as a snack. So, if you or your patients have a typical day where you're having maybe breakfast and lunch, and then you have that long time through dinner, not planning that snack is likely to end up in heading towards, the ultra processed options in the vending machine. So think about bringing that fruit with you as a snack. Or if you're not away from home and you could do it, you could make a fruit kebab for maybe you're preparing snacks for your kids as they're coming home from school. Next slide. So one of the last things I do want to talk about with fruit is that as we buy fruit, and even to our best of our abilities, we had planned on making that fruit salsa, and that day just went haywire, and we have this fruit that's now going bad at the end of the week. Think about freezing it. Frozen fruit goes really, really well into smoothies. And I love to save them in that way and not let them get bad. Or you could just throw them in the oven and roast them and make a completely different option and put that over, some of your plain grilled meat as well. And finally, you could think about, preserving them. And next slide, please. You could think about preserving them literally as preserves or as jams, just cooking them down on the pot with a little bit of water and some other spices or seasonings, and can make it into a beautiful sauce. Okay, so how do we make vegetables the star of the dish? Obviously, we could think about rubbing vegetables on rubbing spices on cauliflower and slow roasting it in the oven. You could think about what you have in your fridge and not letting it go bad. So if I am putting on my oven, I always think, what do I have in that veggie drawer that could be roasted along with that chicken that's being cooked? So, you have that old bag of carrots in the produce drawer, or some onions that have been sitting there for a while. Put them on another pan if you're turning on the oven, just a little bit of olive oil and some spices, and you could roast off those vegetables. And then you could use them maybe with some hummus and making a veggie sandwich. Or maybe you have, you're thinking about how to just make your regular meals more nutrient dense, like a pasta dish. Don't forget to think of making, maybe replacing half of your spaghetti with zucchini noodles, or trying to make a stir fry base with some cauliflower rice. Next slide, please. So when you've roasted off these vegetables, remember, you could blend them up as part of a sauce or a spread. You could add mushrooms to extend ground beef in recipes. And you also want to think about the patient's lifestyle. Do they have time to do all this? If not, how can they start it in the beginning of the week and then cross-utilize those ingredients as they go forward? Okay, next slide. So here we are in whole grains. So in order to make, refined grains into nutrient-dense options, we do want to make them whole grains. One of the really important components of this lesson is to make sure your patients know what whole grains are. I spent a lot of time explaining what is a whole grain and how to look on a package to know and identify it. So if your patient is looking, say, okay, I guess I think I am having a whole grain, I am having multi-grain bread. Well, you might want to explain to them or have a sample label that shows the difference between what is multigrain and what is whole grain. So if it's a whole grain, the first word in the ingredients label will be whole. Some other reasons why a patient might not be able or may not think they will be able to make this transition to whole grains is that, next slide, is that it takes a while to cook, right? It could take 45 minutes to an hour to cook one of those whole grains that was listed on the slide before. So think about your patient's lifestyle. Do they have time to cook that whole grain product? If they're having it at dinner, do they have time to cook it at dinner? If not, can we talk about batch cooking earlier in the week? Or is there a parboiled option? And if you do look for that parboiled option in the grocery, you still want to check the fiber and make sure that none of the fiber was taken off to make it a quick cooking product. But thinking about making that transition with your patients or having your patients make them, they may be quite resistant. There are people who feel very connected to their white rice. And when someone is not ready for that change, it's best to find something else. So, okay, you're not ready to switch from the white rice. What's happening at breakfast? Can we talk about moving from a piece of white toast to whole grain toast or a whole grain English muffin? Okay, next slide, please. So another important component of nutrient-dense foods are lean proteins. So we want to choose lean proteins and incorporating those lean protein foods. Next slide, please. So you want to pay attention to what you're choosing and help your patient understand how do I identify a lean cut of meat, right? So the saturated fat in a piece of meat is the white marbling. So if you're saying to choose a lean cut over a fatty cut, great idea to make sure they know, what that means, or that choosing chicken or turkey or seafood as the lean protein might work well for them. It's great to think of vegetarian sources as the protein food, especially when we're thinking about sustainability. So thinking about tempeh or tofu as part of a stir fry, for example. We'll be talking about tempeh and tofu in a little bit, or maybe they'll swap out a nut butter for a butter spread. Next slide, please. Okay, so for dairy foods, it is really interesting and delicious to swap out some or all of, the sour cream or mayonnaise in a coleslaw and a favorite dip to yogurt. Consider low-fat yogurt as a base for a curry or stew, as well as, instead of the cream. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we're talking about oils, we want to think about shifting or transitioning from saturated fat to unsaturated fats, including vegetable oils, seed and nut oils. Fats are really important to us. We do need these essential mono and polyunsaturated fatty acids in our diet, but because they are calorie dense, we do want to use them with care. So trying to pick the healthiest option for what you're doing is a great idea and a great way to make the food more nutrient dense. Think about the smoke point when you're cooking, and if you're going to be cooking with high heat, make sure to use the oil that can handle that instead of one that might smoke at a lower heat. And next slide, please. We did talk about added sugar, so reminding you that if you are looking to make your foods more nutrient dense, to remove the added sugars. What are some practical examples of how to do this is maybe to make your own coffee drinks without added sugar pumps, sweeten things with fruit instead of added sugars, or maybe try an alternative sweetener for the good, better option. May not be the best option, but it is the good and better option. So next slide, please. In conclusion, it is in order to help you and your patients to transition to nutrient-dense foods, really think about where you are or meeting your patients where they are and helping them figure out what is the first step and then the next step and then the next step to go from where they are to good, then better, then maybe even the best option. Emphasize that all of these small changes really do add up and can make a really big difference when it comes to increasing nutrient density. And we want to provide the right amount of information for each patient's lifestyle, culture, means, ability, and so on. Taking the steps in the right directions really could lead to big changes over time. So I'm really excited to share the spotlight with Allie, who is going to be making some really delicious foods with us today. So I will hand it over to Allie.
Thanks. There we go. Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. Great. So we're really excited to get started. I know we have several of you who are in the kitchen cooking with us. Maybe you're picking all the recipes, maybe you're picking one or two. So really the focus of today is all about nutrient density, as Jennifer was talking about, and also cross-utilization. So we all have very busy lives and schedules. I know I do, and many of my family and friends. So really we try to figure out how do we cook once, eat twice or three times, and really plan out the week so that you can utilize ingredients in all different ways. So we're going to be cooking with some really fun things today. Maybe some ingredients you've never cooked with, for example, tempeh or golden beets, some of my favorites. So just to get things started, we're going to be making 4 different recipes today. The first is a spiced tempeh with roasted beets and carrots and a yogurt sauce. So essentially what you're going to see is, as Jennifer was mentioning, we're going to be using a sheet pan meal as the base of this whole week of cross-utilization. So how we center around the recipes, you can pick 1 or 2 and make them separately, but they also really work well if I'm making my base tempeh and roasted beets, and then I'm using, for example, those carrot tops, these beautiful carrot tops from these very nice carrots we found, and we'll talk about these in a minute, in a spring green salad with a peach vinaigrette, which utilizes the roasted peaches. From there, we're going to take our leftover carrots, though you could technically make this all in a day like I'm doing, taking the leftover carrots and making them into a sauce for a creamy pasta, as well as using some of the tops for a gremolata on the top of that. And then finally, to round it all out, we're going to use the rest of the vegetables, the roasted peaches and beets, with some cheese in a wild rice grain bowl. So we have a lot to get through. So we're going to get things started. And right now I'm going to move over to my pot where I'm getting some wild rice started. So I'm going to migrate over this direction. All right, looks like this is working. And so I have 2 things on the stove right now to get things started. And as these boil, I'll go back and talk about what's sitting at my station a bit. So I have wild rice in this pot right here. So you can see it up to the camera. There we go. So it is actually a grass instead of a rice, but it's still called rice. So what I've done with this is I've just taken it and put it in a strainer here and rinsed it off until the water ran nice and clear. What you're trying to do is just kind of separate the granules and remove a little bit of that excess starch. So this is about 1 cup of rice, 3 cups of water. It takes a lot of water. What I have found in wild rice is that no matter what I do, I will always have a little extra water. So if at the end of the long cooking time, these 45 minutes, you have some leftover water and you need to strain your rice, I would not be alarmed with that. We still want a nice chewy texture. And I think sometimes when you wait for the rice to fully suck up all that water, it gets a little soft. So this is starting. And then here on my left is a pot is my blanching liquid. So just like cooking things multiple times, I'm going to be using 1 pot of water for several things today. So I'm going to start this water ready and starting to boil, and I'm getting the rice up to a boil as well. And I would ask you all to not let me forget that this rice is boiling as we go back to the cutting board. I'll wait for this to boil and start cutting up our other ingredients. So back at my cutting board here, we're going to start cutting up some of my favorite ingredients so we can show them off. So the first is, these are golden beets. They are very funny looking. You may have not seen them before. Sometimes they come small and with the leaves. These were loose in the supermarket, and we're going to be using 2 for this recipe. So as we mentioned, we're just starting with all of the mise en place, all of the prep, getting everything together for the roasted beets and carrots based recipe. So just so that you have a sense of what's on my board and what's around me, because I know it's somewhat limited on what you can see. First is, as Jennifer mentioned, the trash and the treasure pot here. So this is my garbage, my trash. And I also have a little bowl that I'm going to be putting in treasure, like my peelings from my carrots, cuts from my onions. We have a lot of things, because we have lots of recipes to get through. We have a lot of things already cut up. And I know that y'all spent some time in the knife skills portion earlier, so you don't have to go through, cutting up an onion, etc. I think one of the things you'll notice about me cutting up things today is that it is definitely going to be more rustic. These are recipes that I make at home. And also a lot of times I don't want to spend all of the time making the perfect tiny dice for this recipe. So if you want to practice your more meticulous knife skills, we'll still be using them, but your more even knife cuts, you can also do that for that recipe as well, but you'll see it's a little bit more rustic feel. So you have a look at my station. The other thing, just so that you know, is behind me is this giant ice bath, which essentially is water and ice. We'll be blanching a couple of ingredients today, namely the carrot tops. And so when you blanch, it's a very quick bath in the water, right? So it's just 15 seconds, just helps to get some bitterness out. It also helps to get the green, really bright green color to stay in the carrot tops. But what you need to do is make sure you have ice available, right? Ice and water, because one of the things that I do sometimes when I'm blanching things is put it in the pot and then forget that I need to have that cold shocking it. So what we're doing today, besides doing cross utilization, is all of these kind of techniques that chefs use to stay organized, to stay clean, to stay prepared, right? Trying to limit my movements around the kitchen, trying to make sure all of my prep is done before I even start cooking anything, reading the recipe all the way through. This sometimes is a hard one to get your mind around, and making sure, like, I have to preheat your oven. So if you're cooking with me, my oven is at 400 degrees. I am keeping a watchful eye on my rice because as soon as that boils, I will turn it down. And I'm going to start prepping some of my ingredients. So as I said, golden beet, this comes in many colors, red, and also this kind of golden yellow, orange color. So I'm going to take my knife. This has been washed. Everything on my table has been given a nice scrub because these spend some time in the ground. So you're going to want to get that dirt off there. So if they are attached to that big leaf, you will just take that off here. So you'll just remove that leaf. Imagine this had this nice greenery, and put that to the side. That is a treasure. Maybe not one you'd use in stock, but one that I would use similar to the carrot tops that we're using. So what I'm going to do is just cut off the little ends of my beet. There we go. Give it a nice stand. And I know you probably saw that from Knife Skills. It's all about getting a nice base so that things aren't slipping around everywhere. So these are going in my trash bucket just because they're the little edges. And what I'm going to do is give these a cut. But first, I'm going to peel this. And my favorite thing about golden beets and beets in general is that they are beautiful, and option that's wonderful, they don't stain your hands like traditional beets do. I love red beets. They're wonderful. If you've decided to go with red beets today, I would suggest either wearing a glove or just being ready for your hands to be tie-dyed for the rest of the day, because you will have pink fingers. So I'm just going to peel this beet, and I'm actually going to peel it right over the garbage bowl just to make my life a little easier. And what you will see is they're Beautiful. As Jennifer mentioned, and Jennifer is also here, by the way, and I'm going to, so I'm not just talking at you. A lot of times I'm going to be throwing the camera over to Jennifer. I want, this is fun, this is casual, put questions in the chat. Jennifer, perfect, multiple spotlight, that's what I wanted. So I can see your smiling face over there. And that was a really fun presentation, and I'm going to look for Jennifer to build on a lot of these concepts. I think it's so exciting to actually put together the pieces of being able to translate real recommendations into food. How do we actually want to do this? How do we actually want to increase nutrient density? And that's what we're doing today. So here we go. My beet is peeled. And while that is peeled, I am going to turn my rice down on low, cover it, and get it simmering. And Jennifer, if you could start the discussion about a terrifying and exciting product that we have today, which is tempeh. So I'm going to go cover my rice and let her talk about what is tempeh as I dance it around the screen. Thanks, Jennifer.
No problem. So tempeh, what is tempeh? You or your patients may not know what it is. They may not have ever tried it. Tempeh are cooked soybeans that are fermented and then pressed into a firm, dry loaf or sort of cake or patty, sort of a rectangle. There are different levels of firmness. It's the fermentation that gives the soybeans in tempeh kind of a nutty, earthy flavor and a chewy texture. Tempeh can be grilled or baked or stir-fried or crumbled like ground meat and used in like sandwiches or tacos or something like that. All tempeh is made with fermented soy. What is the difference between tofu and tempeh? You may be asking yourself, or your patients may be asking. So tofu and tempeh are both made from soybeans, and they are good vegetarian sources of protein. Tempeh is drier and denser than tofu, which makes it kind of hold up better during certain cooking preparations. Tofu is made of condensed unfermented soy milk and has a more neutral flavor. So it absorbs the taste of other ingredients in a dish better than tempeh does. Important to note, especially for food allergies, tempeh often has other ingredients added like wheat or other grains or seeds or nuts or spices. So if you are on any kind of restricted diet or have allergies, make sure that the tempeh that you buy is labeled accordingly to what you need to have in your diet. You can substitute tempeh for tofu, but you really want to consider the dish you're making before you make that switch. Tempeh has other flavors, and it definitely could have other fillers, and so it could really give a much different flavor profile. Tofu really does absorb the flavors that it's with. So if you really want a neutral protein, tofu might be your better bet. If you want something that has a nuttier or harder flavor, tempeh might be your best bet. And so, yeah, that's a quick tutorial on the difference between tempeh and tofu.
Thanks, Jennifer. No, it's really exciting. I feel like the first time I had tempeh, I thought it looked really crazy until and kind of started off. I would say this is more an advanced tempeh introduction because you're eating it more in its like pure form. If you want to try to slow walk your introduction into tempeh, some of the best things are tempeh tacos, tempeh chili. I have pulled the wool over the eyes of several meat eaters who had no idea. I checked the allergens first, don't worry. But had no idea that the chili that they were eating had tempeh in it, and they were firmly against tempeh. So you never know until you try it, right?
Was that pun intended for firm and tempeh?
I love that. Okay, so a couple things. The rice is cooking. Make sure to set a timer. It's going to take about 45, 50 minutes. And as I said, I would check it about 45. That's what I'll be doing because I want that white, that little bit of like al dente toothsomeness. Okay, so golden beet, let's cut this guy up. So one of the things is that there are every beet that you have is going to look different. Some of them are tiny and like wonky. Some of them are long. Some of them are circular like this one. So what I'm going to do for this beet is I actually am going to keep the nice rounded edge. I'm not going to make them into those square nice square kind of logs, but you'll see that it's a similar concept here. So I'm going to essentially dice this into, I would say probably like 1/2 inch chunks. So what I'm doing is just slicing it all the way through. And then I'm going to use kind of the concepts that you used yesterday. So, right, so like pull this guy in half. And then from here, we're going to cut it into sticks, matchsticks, 1/2 inch about. And then we're going to cut it into cubes. So the nice thing about this, and one of the great things about beets, Jennifer already said this, is that they are delicious raw or cooked. I love raw beets. I think that they have that nice, really fresh flavor. They are bright, and also they're a lot of times not used raw, especially if you cut them thin, if you marinate them. They are delicious. And so also just some knife skill things that you will also see me using, holding my knife. I'm using a very sharp kind of a heavy knife for this because beets, especially if it's not sharp, can be kind of very tough to get through. Not as tough as butternut squash, another awesome yellow orange vegetable, but can be a little rough there. So also fingers very closely watching what I'm doing. I would maybe not suggest talking while you're doing this unless you spend a lot of time in the kitchen. So what I'm trying to do here though is what you'll notice when I start cutting my carrots is that my carrots and beets are going to be about the same size. So as weird or wonky pieces as you might get from these kind of edges, and I want to eat these. I happen to think that the rustic look is very pretty. But if you were making those nice kind of edges, I would use those sides in your treasure pile and marinate them, put some spices on them, and you can eat those raw or roasted in and of itself as kind of a chef's snack behind the scenes. So I'm adding these to my bowl. You'll notice that I've been, to save a little bit of time here, this recipe uses 2 beets, but I have been cutting them up, and look at how beautiful they are when they are together. Yeah, they're so nice. Jennifer, are you a red or a yellow beet person?
I welcome all colors.
All colors of the rainbow. I think that's a very diplomatic answer. Don't want to offend either beet. Okay, so carrots. So what you have noticed from the carrot recipe here is that we asked you to get carrots plus carrot tops. So if we were at Jennifer's house, you would see these gorgeous carrots that she got from her garden, but not all of us are that lucky, though the kitchen I'm in, Dr. Harlan's house, is absolutely gorgeous, so I cannot complain. But I believe that we have some pictures of what these look like. Yeah, those are gorgeous. So
yes,
carrots,
I am.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Go ahead. I'll talk about this when we have a moment.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be cutting carrots for a while, so we will have a minute. So one of the things that we're doing here is if you have this big bunch, we have 2 bunches of carrots, right? So all I've done is just snipped off the tops, and I have kept them because tops of a lot of vegetables like carrots, like beets, are one of my favorite in culinary ingredients, and are also very typically garbage or waste. Obviously you can compost them, which makes lovely compost, but why when they taste so delicious? So what we're going to be doing today are a couple of concepts. I'll show you how to cut these carrots and pick the tops, and then I'll show you how to blanch the carrot tops so that they lose some of that bitterness. If you want to use them fresh, some of my favorite fresh carrot top recipes are more in a gremolata or a pesto or a sauce. It adds that like herby punch that really tastes like carrots. It's pretty funny. Surprise, carrot tops. So what I'm going to do with these carrots, and then I'll have Jennifer talk about her beautiful bounty that is her garden, and it's gorgeous. So these are pretty thin. If you got bulk carrots, what I'm going to try to do is match my carrots to about this size. This is a beet. So a trick, as I was learning back in the day when I was learning to cut, take one of your beet pieces and put it on your cutting board as your guide. Then it will help you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to match my pieces here to the extent that I can. These have been scrubbed because they were very dirty and peeled lightly. Honestly, if I didn't want this to look so beautiful, I would not have peeled them. I love carrots unpeeled, but they look much nicer and cleaner. If you give them a really good scrub and they're fresh and young, I have no problems with not peeling them. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one and then do all of them while Jennifer is talking. So these are kind of small. You could roast these whole. They are delicious. But what I would do here is I'm going to, on a big carrot, I would have cut this in 4s, right? So because I want it to match this. But for these, because these carrots are thin and small, I'm just going to cut them in half, right? And then slice the halves. Yeah, you can see, slice the halves. Great. So they look like that.
I love this idea. I've never tried that, to put the piece you're trying to match on the board. I think that's a great idea. Very practical solution there.
Why make your life harder, right?
Absolutely.
So what I cut carrots. Jennifer, you guys can all watch me cut carrots. Jennifer, please tell us about your beautiful bounty.
Oh, thank you. So I think it would be interesting to tell everyone that when we were months ago, when we were thinking about what we wanted to talk about today, Allie said, what are you cooking these days? Like, what's interesting you? And I looked out my window and I said, oh, we planted I planted carrot seeds for the first time. I can't wait to see what happens. And they're just starting to come up. And from then until this week, this is what's happened. So I pulled one of the carrots just to see what it is now. So from this height of carrot tops, the carrot itself is about 1.5 inches. So it still has a ways to go before I would really want to pull all of them. But it is really exciting to see it. And I promise you that this garden looks so much better than the amount of effort that I have put into it. So in the front, you see the carrot tops. The middle is red leaf lettuce that is about to be done. Really, lettuce is a cold weather crop. And so we had been growing it. And I think probably when I get back to my house, it's going to be all done, because these hot days it's just not, lettuce is not meant to be grown in our region. This doesn't work well. And behind the lettuce are tomato plants. So I'm very excited to have this garden and be able to really truly have some farm to table goodies. And so I was thinking about how to use all these carrot tops. I was thinking about it, and that's how Allie and I started talking about what she wanted to make today. This is what inspired it. So here you go. It's very organic, this whole thing. So one of the interesting things about these carrot tops, I was curious, and what else could I make with it? And I found this really interesting idea to roast the carrots and then make a gremolata of the carrot tops and lay that on top. And it was so beautiful and kind of full circle to me. I just love the idea. So for those of you who don't know what a gremolata is, it's basically a green sauce. It's a raw green sauce. Usually, or traditionally, it's made with chopped parsley and lemon zest and garlic. And I had to say lemon zest because, as Carrie knows, the zester is my favorite tool in the kitchen. So I have to discuss it all the time. And so if you're interested in other ways to use these carrot tops, you can make a gremolata, and again, put that on top of any kind of roasted vegetable, or maybe some roasted cauliflower, or chicken or fish, so on.
Great. I mean, I think that you'll see where the gremolata, because of that gremolata idea, that gremolata is reflected later on in the creamy carrot pasta, because you got to use that gremolata. It was a really inspiring concept. So that you can see carrots, we have cut up a lot of our carrots. You'll see that they are closely sized to the beet. And we have enough of these here. I've used 2 bunches of, and don't you worry, these carrots will be used in something. But if you're using this recipe, this amount is about 2 bunches of those carrots. Or I would say it's kind of close to about a pound of carrots. So you'll be using these in a couple of different things. So what I'm going to do is just finish cutting 1 or 2 of these that I've sliced up. And then we'll talk about the carrot tops. So carrot tops are fun, as Jennifer and I have been talking about. But you might be saying, how the heck do I work with these things, right? So here they are. These have been rinsed off and dried once. So if you're looking for, one of the ways that I did this was just rinse them and then pop them in a paper towel. I keep waving these around. So you'll see that I picked some already, and I'll talk about how we're going to pick the carrot tops here. This is a very fun and cathartic exercise by which you literally pick, but then one of the fun things you can do too is strip it backwards. So I'll show you again how we did that. So let's take a nice luscious carrot top here, carrot top. So I'm just going to pick these end ones, but I essentially hold it from the top and I pull it off, and then you have a clean stick. So this goes in my compost pile. So I don't know if you call that trash or treasure. I think that's the true treasure, right? Next generation vegetable. But so here, I'm going to try to make some quick work of this. You can use these little stems. Really, you can in salads. But they tend to be a little bit tougher, a little bit more bitter. I kind of find this in a gremolata, I'll use them because I'll chop them up. If I'm making a pesto, I'll use them because I'll chop them up. But I generally will, if I'm making a pesto, do something like this where I chop off the more like thick pieces of the stem, put that in my compost pile, and then work with the more delicate, tender pieces, similar to if you were using a parsley, or another type of herb there. So I'm going to, while you all are doing this as well, because this does take a little bit of time, I do have a bowl of some already picked ones, but I do want you to see the process by which you do this. It's really nice on a Sunday. A lot of times this is where I'll do like my batch cooking for the week. And I think it's helpful because I think the whole kind of concept here is changing the stigma and sad reputation that leftovers got, because honestly, I don't have time to cook 5 fresh meals every single week during the weekday, or I would rely on more processed food options or restaurant foods that have a lot of sodium in them. So I'm going to try. I usually try on Sunday to make as many things as I can, and having the time, a little bit of extra time to kind of pick and prep your vegetables can be really helpful. So I am going to just about finish that so that we can get on with the next piece here.
I'm going to jump in if I could while you're finishing that for a moment. I do want to answer a couple of questions. We did get a bunch of questions in the Q&A, so I just want to jump in and start answering them.
I can't see them, Jennifer, so tell me what they are.
This is going back a little bit to when I was in the main presentation, and someone asked about thoughts on flavored sparkling water. And I love to talk about flavored sparkling water because most of the people who I speak with are not getting enough fluid, and they just think, I just don't want to drink water. I understand, although I love drinking water, I understand it may not be everyone's favorite thing. So again, I try to meet patients where they are and get from where they are and making good changes, and then a little bit better, and then a little bit better. We're not aiming for converting everyone who's drinking, 5 colas a day to only drinking water in a day, right? That transition is really tough, but we can work towards going from good where they are to making good choices. So in fact, flavored sparkling water is a great choice, right? It does not have added sugar, is really what we're looking for. We're trying to take out the added sugar. So if you're having sparkling water and adding your own flavors to it, like lemon or lime, or putting herbs in there like basil or thyme, or a combination of all those things, or maybe orange peel, you can make so many different delicious flavors of your own sparkling water. If you're buying the ones from the grocery store where the flavors are already mixed in, just take a look at the nutrition facts label and be sure that they're not also adding sodium and sugar and the things that we're trying to avoid. So those are my thoughts on flavored sparkling water.
Nice.
Shall I keep going, or are you ready to talk about the next
I'm ready, but I am curious, are there any relevant questions to our current process in the chat right now that we should be aware of?
Oh, the chat is not asking too many questions about this last I looked. Let me just take a quick peek. Let's see. They're talking about other ways that carrot tops might be used. And just so that you have
Oh,
a sense of
yes.
humor from what's happening here, there's lots of discussion of rabbits and how they eat all of these foods, which is fun, but we're not preparing rabbit today, so I don't think that's super relevant, but it's funny. We're not talking about eating the rabbit, of course. It's what the rabbit is eating. I was just diverging there for a moment. I should say that I live where there are rabbits everywhere, and I don't understand why they are not eating my carrot tops, but they are not. We have done nothing to keep any animals away. Don't eat a rabbit, sorry. I want to eat a rabbit. This got dark. We will not. I don't do anything to my garden to keep away pests. I don't know how we've gotten so lucky, but the rabbits do not eat our carrot tops. I have no idea why.
Well, that is very lucky. I think you
It is
definitely go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There was a very interesting comment about dal with green tops and spiced yogurt. It's so simple and so amazing. I have to say that sounds really amazing, and feel free to share a recipe.
Yeah, that sounds delicious. That sounds delicious, and you can use them for so many things. So we're going to be using them in a couple of different ways today. So I have the picked tops; they are done, and I also have some that I'm going to keep probably raw a bit for the gremolata. You can use the cooked one, you can use the raw ones, depends on your preference. So what I'm going to do is cut two more things that we need today. I need to cut peaches, my stone fruit, and I know that Jennifer will have lots of things to say about stone fruits because she loves them. So do I. These are my favorite fruit besides cherries. Incidentally, also has a pit. So here's the tempeh. All we're going to do for the tempeh, here's what it looks like if you are not cooking with tempeh. Do not be alarmed there if you see the black or dark on it. It has not gone bad. That is actually what it just looks like. It's fermented. This one, of course, this one doesn't have a lot on it, but there's a little zoom close up of some of the dark area. If it is your first time eating tempeh, I'm not actually blanching it, but when I was first introduced to it, we blanched it quickly, and that helps to take away some of the bitterness. But in the spice blend in bath it's getting, I don't think it really needs it. So all we're going to do is slice this. Everything's kind of going into similar pieces, about between half, quarter inch. It's definitely not a quarter inch. I think it's more closer to a half inch. Slice. There it is. And this is just one brick of tempeh, though I'm considering cutting this other brick of tempeh in case the post helpers who are around want to have some as well. So this is easy to slice, easy to do. I'm just going to put this on a plate to the side because I'm going to get its spice blend ready. So this is tempeh. One of the things is that when it cooks, it gets a little bit more fragile. So be careful with it. As you lift it up, you can see I'm pretty much manhandling it on the plate, and then it will get its spice bath. So for this recipe, we have, and actually I apologize because for this recipe, we did do 2 bricks of tempeh. That's what I thought, why I laid one out. So when you cut it out, also, sometimes it can smell a little funky, again, fermented, so unsurprising. So here we go, second brick. And it's really easy. This is also nice because unlike meat, this is really in the trash. Because unlike meat, you'll notice I'm like wiping my cutting board down a lot to try to keep things clean, but this is nice because it's vegetarian and can be, vegan options. Just be careful because depending on what type of tempeh, it's not gluten-free. So here we go. Tempeh is sliced and put to the side. And the last thing I'm going to do, but I'm going to just wipe my board down. Like to keep things nice and tidy here. Are cut peaches. So disclosure, these peaches really are not that ripe. It's coming into season. I think I just didn't get the most beautiful versions, but it's actually perfect because that's why we're roasting them. So if these were non-clean peaches, you could cut them by rolling around the side and twisting them. But because these peaches are not ripe, that's not going to happen. So what I'm going to do is option 2 is just cut around the pit with my knife, and I will use my paring knife to kind of get some of that flesh that's still left. So what we're going to do with these peaches is use them in two ways. I'm going to be using them for the grain bowl, and then in slices. And then I'm also going to be using either fresh or roasted peaches in the vinaigrette that we're going to be making. That's a similar thing, base vinaigrette, two different ways. We're using lots of cross utilization and even our base ingredients today as well. So I'm going to also clean. I don't like to use a lot of waste here, so I'm going to clean these up and really use all of the edges around the peach and use this in my vinaigrette, because it doesn't matter what it looks like for the vinaigrette, it's going to get blended up. So I'm going to put these in a little bowl.
Allie,
Go ahead,
can I
Jennifer.
ask you a few chef questions that are coming up?
Sure, cool.
So I just want to make sure about them. I know my answer, but since you are the chef, I do want to get your answer. Do you use any special kind of peeler for your beets? And have you ever cooked beets without, or prepared beets without peeling them? I certainly have not. I've always peeled my beets. I've never tried to not peel beets. So I did want to ask you about that. What kind of peeler do you use? And the same question about peelers with butternut squash. I have some answers, but I wanted to get the chef answer first.
That's fair. Those are very good questions. And also, while we're talking, I'm just going to slice these. Everything's kind of the same size, right? So sliced into, half inch, I think, slices. Okay, so the first one is peeling. Let's see. Do I have any? What was the first question? Sorry, Jennifer.
Have you ever prepared beets without peeling them?
Yes, I have. Though, actually, what ends up happening is that when I usually end up roasting them, if I'm going to eat them raw, absolutely peel them. If I am going to roast them, one of the other tricks is wrapping the entire beet whole in tinfoil and throwing it like on the grates in the oven, just as a blob. Make sure you give it a poke or two though, so it can kind of let some of the juice escape. But when I do that, that's when I peel it at the end. So like when you take it out of that tinfoil, the peel just like rubs right off. So those are the two kind of ways I cook it. I'm sure you could eat the skin. Even with a good scrub, it's pretty bitter and not great.
Yeah,
so,
I have never.
Yeah.
I've always done one of the two. I've either peeled it for raw preparation, or most often I just put olive oil on it, put it in tinfoil and put it in the oven. When it comes out and it cools a little bit, I have to be honest, I usually do get the red beets because that's what I see more often in the grocery store. And I definitely get the some gloves, because your hands will be purple for days if you don't. And then if you do that, the peel really does slide right off and it's not difficult. In terms of, I do want to respond real quick to a question or a comment about the raw beets.
Sure.
So there was a comment in the chat box about raw beets not being recommended. And it was from a 2016 issue in France. It really applied only to France. And it was from some unknown contamination in 2016, but this did not come to the US and it is not a current threat. So you do not need to worry about consuming raw beets right now. So thank you for asking about that in the chat. Also, regarding peeling, what kind of peeler?
I just have I replace my peeler pretty frequently. I have just a very sharp peeler. I know that that's not very exciting answer, but I just try to keep everything that I use ridiculously sharp so that then it peels easier. And peeling butternut squash definitely blunts the peeler. And sometimes depending on who you can take them to, the person that sharpens my knives when I get them taken in will also sharpen my peeler, which is pretty cool. But I don't have a special peeler I use outside of, you also can just cut the peel off or use a very sharp paring knife, which is honestly maybe my preferred option, but that's also, takes a little bit of practice to be able to really peel it off. Again, very sharp. But Jennifer, do you have a special peeler you use?
I have never sharpened a peeler, which now I realize this is something I must try, because that sounds like it will solve a lot of problems. I wonder if the person who posed that question has ever sharpened her peelers. That would be, or his, I'm not sure who asked the question. What I do have different peelers, but none of my other peeler, I love my serrated peeler, but I don't recommend it for anything that is hard. I actually use my serrated peeler for peeling things like a peach, or oh my gosh, I'm losing my train of thought. For peeling things that are a little bit softer, it very easily gets, oh, for mango skin, I couldn't remember. For peeling off a mango, things that are soft underneath, that's when I like to use my serrated peeler. For butternut squash, I have found the easiest thing for me is a very, very, very sharp knife. And that just cuts
Yeah.
through it. And don't try and get too big sections at a time, like do small strips. And that, to me, I can make pretty good work of it.
Yeah, I usually use a knife, but I also know, like, I usually use a knife to peel most things. Actually, instead of a peeler, I'm just used to using a paring knife, but I know that that's not always the easiest, most accessible thing. So just get a sharp, and also, you know, obviously we don't want to be throwing things away, but at least peelers are a inexpensive tool. So while you're getting it sharpened or finding another one, you can try also the julienne peelers, which are really fun, not for butternut squash, but just in general. They make those ribbons as well. Okay, so I am going to take my beautiful and now picked lovely carrot tops over to the stove. And what we're going to do here is kind of some quick work. So first, to make my life easier, and it's a very full thing of ice water. First, I'm going to take some of this ice out of my ice water because it has turned into one brick of ice. So make your lives easier, only needs a little bit. I'm going to go over to my stove and I'm going to blanch these. So a couple things just to remember about, just so you know, my wild rice has some salt in it, just so everyone knows, a very little amount while it was cooking. I realized I didn't mention that. A lot of times you can blanch things in water that has salt as well. You'll notice that there's a lot of things that chefs put salt into, like the water for pasta and things like that, where I actually, the water for pasta is one thing, but I actually try to remove a lot of the salt from when I'm just cooking in general and add it in on the end. So for example, when I'm blanching, I am not going to be putting salt in this one. Just because I'd rather put it at the end for me. So I'm going to move these over here. I see that there is a split screen on my, there's a split screen on my pot. And also, funny enough, most of the water has boiled away. So I'll have to replace that. But what I'm going to do is take a big handful of these and throw them in the pot. You know what? Don't want to overcrowd it. That's another important thing. So all this is going to do, let me crank this up, just a couple of seconds. So really fast. Just so count to 10.
I love that you're showing us how to blanch, because this might not be something that everyone has done before, and they really get a sense of how to do this, right? To really, okay, I've seen it, I can do it. It's not hard. I just got to try it once. And so there you have it. It's boiling. You were definitely in there for, I don't know, 10 or 20 seconds, it seemed like, maybe more. Yeah. And now it's straight into the ice bath.
Yep. Normally, I usually do about 10, 15 seconds. Okay. My clumsiness, as Jennifer said, between 10 and 20, my clumsiness definitely made that look less smooth as some people. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to do is two things. One, I'm going to just put these in the ice bath, right? So quick in the ice, just a little dunk. And then I am actually, so one thing that would be smart is that if you had a strainer that had a handle, you can hold it, keep them in there, dunk it in the water, pull it out, dunk it in the ice bath, pull it out, right? That's definitely the efficient, smart way to do it. Just depends on what type of tool. And I think you can maybe see, I'm going to move, you know what? I'm going to move back to my cutting board. 1 second. So you can see what I'm doing here. Be prepared to have some very cold fingers. All right, so I have moved back to my cutting board. Here I am, here they are. So they will be very wet, right? So first, you're gonna wanna give them a nice drain. And also one of the things to notice is that they have reduced down a lot, right? So, we had this big giant thing of greens. And actually one of the things, if you're not gonna use them, you can blanch them, dry them, and then freeze them, just like most types of greens or herbs, and then use them later on. So these are drying for a second. And as they do, I'm going to add a bit more water to my pot because I will need this for the pasta. So I'm going to do that quickly. And
So
I'm going to dry them up.
While you're doing that, I'm going to answer another question if I could. But first, before I do that, I would like to remind everyone who's cooking along to please share with us what you're doing. So you could share it via social media. I know they've talked about that. Or also you could send it to Carrie. And I'll tell you right now, but Carrie, oh great. Thank you. Carrie is putting her email and her text in the chat box. So please send us your photos so we could see what you're doing. We'll do the best we can to replicate what it would be like to be all cooking together. So thank you for that in advance. Allie, are you still working or should I talk about my next thing I have on top?
Oh, whatever you want. I am actually in a good spot with these guys. I have dried them off, but why don't you say your next thought? And by that time we'll be ready to move on. So these are just in a paper towel, and they're just getting nice and dry. Don't worry if they're not bone dry, but just kind of getting most of the moisture off. Go ahead, Jennifer, thanks.
So there was a question if there is another vegan substitute for soy or legumes. If you have a soy or legume allergy, what else can you use if you're trying to be vegan? And so there are some good answers. Number one is the quinoa is a high protein grain. It's actually, and it comes in several different colors. It has different kinds of flavors. Not a ton of different flavors like tempeh and tofu, but it does taste, it doesn't taste like rice. It tastes like its own thing. Also, different rices could work, like wild rice or brown rice or red rice. So those are all vegan choices if you're looking for vegan substitutes that are not soy or legumes. So thank you for that question. That was a good one. One more. Can I go one more, Allie? Are you ready to move on?
I'm ready, but you can do one more.
Go ahead.
Well, I was also going to say that I'm pretty sure that wild rice has all 9 essential amino acids in it, but it might be limited in lysine by a little bit. But I think that just shows that, as Jennifer was saying, that there's a lot of good rices and things that you could use as well. Okay, these have been dried. And all I did was put them on the cutting board and just run a knife through them, a couple of cuts, just so that it's not like when you go in a salad, you get like a big piece of carrot top. And also, instead of using a knife, you can also just like pick them apart a little bit. But these are going to be hanging out and drying a little bit more in my colander while we move on to the next piece of this equation, which is going to be to start to roast the carrots and the beets. And I want to get this going because the carrots and the beets are components of the other things, but we may be using a little bit of magic as we slide things in the oven. We have some that have been already prepared. So what I'm going to do here, it's got a couple things out. So my cutting board is cleaned off again. It's going to be my base station. And what I'm going to do is get my sheet pan ready. So on my sheet pan, and you'll see it in a minute. On my sheet pan, what I'm going to do is make a couple of lines of vegetables. So the first, I'll move that back, is I actually keep all of my vegetables separate. You could mix them together, but because they're used in so many different things, I'm going to keep them separate for now. So first I have some oil. I have a little bit of oil and I have a little bit of vinegar. So a little bit of oil. I think in the recipe we said a tablespoon or 2. I should get a spatula.
Allie, I also want to ask, there's a question in the chat about summarizing where we should be with the cooking at this point.
Oh, sure. Where we should be with the cooking at this point is your rice is cooking, your veggies are cut, your carrot tops are blanched, and you will be moving on to putting your carrots and beets on a sheet pan to roast. So we're still really on that first recipe, but honestly, we're on all the recipes because this is the base materials here.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, okay, so carrots are on the sheet pan, and I'll show you when this is done. So what I'm doing is doing 3 lines of vegetables. I'm doing a line of carrots, and by vegetables, I mean vegetables and fruit. I'm doing a line of carrots. I'm going to be doing a line of beets that will roast, and I'm going to be doing a line of the peaches. And if you do not want to cook the peaches, pick which recipes you're making and kind of go from there. I would say in terms of quantities, I have more carrots than I have beets, just quantity wise, because the carrots will be used in that recipe where we're making the carrot pasta. So what I'm doing in this bowl, each vegetable's going in there. We have a little oil, a little wet red wine vinegar, and a teeny bit of salt and a teeny bit of pepper. More pepper. I like pepper. I'm pretty heavy-handed with the pepper. I mean, tiny bit of salt.
So you're tell me about adding the vinegar to the peaches. What if you didn't do that? Or what if you used a different acid? What would that do to it?
Yeah, so it just really changes the flavor. So I like, my favorite one to do for the peaches actually is to do balsamic vinegar, because you have that like real sweetness from the that you get that helps really blend nicely with the peaches themselves. You don't actually have to add the vinegar to the peaches. When I first roasted them, I didn't. I left it off. But I like it. I'm a big acidity person because I think that when you use kind of more acidity, you can use less salt. That's kind of back to that principle of bulking up the flavor that Jennifer was talking about. So I like to add in savory to my sweet. That's just, I think it's nice to use your sweet things in kind of different and untraditional ways, which is why I use the acid, but you don't have to use it. And you could use really any other vinegar you have. Apple cider vinegar, balsamic, white balsamic, that would be delicious. But bear in mind, I'd use a little bit of a less expensive vinegar because we're cooking it, like white vinegar. So if you're going to use like your nice balsamic, maybe wait till the end. You don't want to use your like expensive, thick, nice balsamic for something that's going to be thrown into the oven.
Awesome. Okay, I have a few cooking questions for the people who are cooking along.
Sure.
For the carrot pasta, will you use the roasted carrots with the vinegar and the olive oil?
Yes, I will be doing that. You could also use raw carrots. They could be raw.
Great, thank you. Should we be mixing the vinegar and oil to all of the veggies before roasting, or was that vinegar and oil just for the peaches, or is there just oil, salt and pepper for the veggies?
Yeah, so I have my little amounts. I believe I can look at the amounts in the recipe, but I use the amounts in the recipe for all 3 ingredients, and you actually notice that I have left a little bit of leftovers. So what I'm doing, instead of drizzling it on over, right? One of the problems when you do that, and I trust me, I'm very lazy when I cook a lot of times, and I like to do that. But one of the reasons that I recommend you don't do that and you mix it in a bowl is because you can use a lot less of oil. So my, in my tablespoon or so, 2 tablespoons of oil that are in this, I have been able to coat all of the vegetables in a bowl. So you put them in a bowl, put a little bit of the oil, put a little bit of the vinegar, put a teeny bit of the salt and pepper, and then you coat everything. So you mix them up instead of pouring it on. And then you, a lot of times, don't realize how much you're using. So you can see they're in the nice little lines here. And one suggestion, again, I would say, if you are using red beets, put a aluminum line between them, or you could even put aluminum foil down, make a little lip and put it on there, because they will bleed over everything. Beautiful, but everything will be pink. So unless you want your entire vegetable medley to be pink, just make sure to protect against that. So I'm just going to go put these in the oven, and then we'll start on our yogurt sauce.
So the next question said, can I use balsamic for all three? And I'm just going to jump in and answer this question, which is, if that sounds good to you, try it, right? If it doesn't sound good to you, then use different vinegars. Really, sometimes people roast vegetables without using a vinegar, but I love this idea that Allie just shared, that if you try it with vinegar, you may want to reduce your salt later. So if it's not something you've done before, give it a try today and let us know what you think when you're done. Send us a note that you've tried, balsamic on this and red wine on that and champagne vinegar on the other. And this is how it all came out, or whatever you choose to do. That's one of the beauties of being a home cook and being able to do what you want to do in your own kitchen.
Thanks. And that's a great point there. No, there's a lot of different, you can really do a lot of experimenting and testing things out. And also, all of these recipes came from Jennifer's and I brainstorming, right? They kind of like pick them from the ether. So, we just picked things we liked, but you can change flavors and ingredients and quantities. That's really what we did. So have fun with them. That's kind of the whole best part, why I love cooking so much. Okay, so we're gonna get the tempeh ready because I want everything to go in the oven. So remember, the veggies are in a 400-degree oven. They're gonna be in there for probably about 25, 30 minutes. You wanna turn them once in between. So one of the things I would say is if you have only one timer on your phone, get a kitchen timer, because part of all of this meal prep and doing all these things at once is we don't want you to burn things. We want you to, not to remember. So the veggies and the tempeh can really go in at the same time, but because we're trying to kind of speed things along here in the demo, we are going to, I put the veggies in there to start roasting, but you can put them in at the same time, essentially, because they're at the same temperature. We tried to do everything at the same temperature and the same cooking time, pretty much. So what I'm going to get started now is our spice blend. Throwback to what Jennifer was saying about making spice blends. So for my tofu, slip of the tongue there. For my tempeh, I'm gonna get my spice blend ready. So in a small bowl, we're gonna put several different ingredients here. So I'm going to put my spices. I believe it's paprika, it's coriander, it's cumin. Big thanks to the organizers of this event for having all of the tiny mise en place cups. They're amazing. Some onion, some garlic powder, and then also honey and lemon juice. This is lemon juice with the zest. I juiced and zest a lemon. I can never abandon the zest on a lemon. It's just like a tragedy. So this is the full juice and zest of a lemon. And then also honey. And you are going to probably need to scoop it out a bit. It's just a tablespoon of honey. And also try the various honeys. This is just a wildflower honey that I saw at the store that was delicious. You could use some from honeycomb. You could use a lighter flavored honey. You could use a different sugar or sweetener.
Was there an amount of lemon juice that was included in that recipe?
I think it's about, it ends up being about a tablespoon or so. I would say maybe a tablespoon and a half. If you have giant lemons, go shoot for about a tablespoon.
There's a question about, can you freeze zest? And I love this question. And my reaction is, why not? I haven't tried it, but now I want to. Has anybody frozen zest before? How did that come out? Don't know. If you take it back out later and use it, I don't see why not. The question is, what is lemon zest? I will answer it as long as, Allie, do you need to talk about what you're doing?
Answer as I'm mixing. This is my spice blend. It is a liquid spice blend. So just so that you know, like normally a spice blend, is just the spices, but this is going to be essentially a marinade for the tofu. So as I'm mixing this, just a fun thing to remember is save half of it, because half of this kind of like spice blend mixture is going to be used in our sauce for later. So I'm just going to put half of this in here. I would say almost like 3/4 of it. I'm just saving like a little bit for the sauce, maybe about a tablespoon or so. And then I'm going to throw my tempeh in and toss it gently. And while I'm doing that, Jennifer, please go ahead.
Yes. So there was a question is, what is zest and how do you get it? And I'm so happy someone asked me this. I feel like it was planted. So for any of you who grew up taking wood shop in middle school, like I did, a zester is an old-fashioned wood rasp. It's kind of a long, do you have one there? Are you just showing it to us? A zester? Sorry, I thought that's what you just put in the camera scene. No, I don't want to stop you. No. I thought you just grabbed it. No worries. We'll get one. So a zester is what takes the outer part of a lemon or a lime or an orange. You can just get the outer bit of that peel, and it has beautiful flavor and smell. The aroma is amazing. And it adds a really concentrated flavor of whatever that product is. So I think it's Dr. Harlan who always says, he never squeezed a lemon, he didn't zest first. And I love that concept because you get the zest off of the peel, then you squeeze the lemon and you use them both and you get a really concentrated flavor, a real hit of that lemony flavor. I love to use lemon zest, lime zest, orange zest, and so on. What you really want to be careful of is that you only get the outer bit. If you get to the white, you don't want to include that part in your product because it's bitter. So you just want the outer part that's the green or the yellow or the orange or whatever that is. So that is zest. If you haven't tried it, please do try it. It will revolutionize your food. I cannot overstate.
Yeah. I mean, I think you always have to, that zest shouldn't be thrown away. It would be such a sad waste of flavor. And it also is great in all baking. I use a lot of zest in drinks. So this isn't a drinks class, but I would say a lot of these ingredients also go really nicely in drinks. So what I have done here is just coated my tempeh. I'm just using my fingers. I was trying to be more delicate, but I use my hands a lot in cooking. So I have my pound of tempeh. I have rubbed it down with its little spice blend. What I've done before I put it in the pan is I just dipped, essentially, I put a tiny bit of oil in the pan, and instead of doing like Pam spray or something like that, I just rubbed it down so that the tempeh wouldn't stick. Again, this is all about trying to like wipe out the amount of oil. You don't need to bathe it in oil. It's not frying in the pan. But you want to have one nice even layer, and you want it to not stick on the pan, but you also don't want to add in a lot of that extra, calories from the oil if you don't need to. You'll eat it later in the vinaigrette. So I'll give you a look at the pan so that you can see where we are here. So here we go. Here's my tempeh, all in one nice little row, flat. And this is going to go roast in the 400-degree oven. And about halfway through, I will give it a flip. So I'm going to do that now. And then also a shout out. It's been for me about 45 minutes. So I'm going to check my rice. And so as I put this in the pan, I'm just going to give my rice a check and turn it off. What you're looking for is a nice bite, a nice chew. And I can show you what my rice looks like when it's done. So let me put this in the pan, and then Carrie, if you want to switch over to the stovetop, I'll show you the rice and what it looks like now.
While Allie is doing that, while she's heading over to the oven, I do want to start to answer a question about if you or your patients are looking to have a plant-based diet, and so they're really reducing their chicken or red meat, or trying not to drink milk or have dairy. How often should your patient consume those foods? And for that question, I'd like to really talk about the good, better, best option, right? So if you have a patient...
Turn your video on for your stove. It looks like it shut off.
Mine?
For the stovetop, yep.
Oh. Technical assistance is on its way.
So while we are waiting on that stove, the stove shot, the stove view, here it comes. So the question about, how much should a patient have? And this is really where we want to rely on the good, better, best discussion, which if you are trying to reduce your meat eating and you currently have it at every meal, perhaps you might try to have it reduced in one of your meals, maybe in your breakfast or your lunches or your dinners or something like that. Or maybe you want to even start even slower by incorporating a lot more vegetables and reducing some of the meat. One of the concepts that we teach about maybe transitioning from, for an example of a meat sauce over pasta, to bring that from where it is to a more nutrient dense option or a more plant-based option is, number one, can you increase the vegetables in that or add vegetables to it and take out some of the meat by adding maybe chopped mushrooms or chopped zucchini. And so now maybe you have half the meat and a lot more vegetables. And then eventually maybe you'll take out all the meat and instead use lentils or another soy product. So there are ways to get from where you are, where your patients are, to where the goal is. And so that's generally our answer for how much to have, is really where are you and where are you trying to go and how can you get there in the stepwise fashion. One slightly additional answer is, because I work at the Cancer Center, a lot of people ask me about how much red meat, and the general answer from the American Institute for Cancer Research is less than 18 ounces per week per person for adults. But that was more of a technical answer from the research on cancer. Allie.
All right, back to me. And I know that we are zooming through our time here, so I'm going to try to do several things kind of more quickly. So we have our rice, and actually I'm going to just bring this over. Oh, there is the camera. Okay, I can't see it. This rice is done. It has that nice bite. Sorry, I realize I have no temperature in my hands. So it has this nice bite. It is very chewy. So that's really what it looks like when it's finished up. So I'm going to put this to the side, but I'm going to strain that out for my rice bowl. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to go back to my cutting board so we can really get moving on the salad and a couple of the salad ingredients that we're going to do here. So one final thing for the tempeh recipe before we move on to the salad is I have yogurt in this bowl. And what I'm going to do, this is just full fat, about 6 ounces of full fat yogurt. It's very thick because it's Greek yogurt, so you might want to thin it out with some water, which is what I'm going to do. So this is the final sauce for the tempeh. So what we're going to do here is pour in the spice mixture that's left into the sauce, into the yogurt, mix that around. And because it's so thick, absolutely, I'm going to add some water to this, because what you wanted is this nice drizzling consistency for your tempeh. So I'm going to add some water. I'm also going to taste it because there is 0 salt or pepper in this. I like to add the salt at the end, as I said. So just mix that up. So we're doing a couple things at once, right? Our tempeh is cooking, our veggies are cooking, we're making the sauces for it, and we're about to make the dressing and the salad to go with the tempeh ingredients. All right. So this is a nice sauce consistency now. It's definitely more of a drizzle than it was before. And I'm going to give it a taste. Need salt, but otherwise it's delicious. Tiny bit of salt, probably might add a little bit more water. And that is ready to go to the side for when we're ready to plate our tempeh, delicious tempeh rice mix. So now let's do the dressings. And we're going to do 2 dressings. We're going to do one for this grain bowl, and we're going to do one for the carrot top salad. So in a little cup, I'm going to be using an immersion blender. Ta-da! These things are amazing. If you do not have one, I would suggest it. This might be my favorite kitchen tool. My life changed. My arm workout ended once I stopped having to lift my blender. So in my little cup here, I'm going to add in my vinegar. So this is base for 2 dressings, right? So this is my red wine vinegar in here. I'm going to add in some Dijon mustard, and I'm just going to get my spatula. So about a tablespoon of Dijon mustard. In you go. I love mustard. It's definitely a great way to add some flavor without a lot of that salt, adds that acidity and punch. I'm going to add in honey. Remove the immersion blender so you can see what I'm doing. Here we go. Add some honey. Perfect. And then I'm going to add in some olive oil. And normally what I would do is if I'm in a blender, I would drizzle it in slowly. But because I'm using an immersion blender, I'm going to give this a little buzz. And then I'm going to drizzle it at the same time. So here we go.
I'm tempted to talk, but I know that it will get loud in a moment. So I will just,
Yes.
I'll wait.
Oh, so here we go. This is dressing one. This is our base dressing. So all we're going to do is make this, turn this, you could eat this like this. You would want to add salt. You would want to add pepper. But this is a red wine vinaigrette, essentially. And it's a little bit different than your average vinaigrette because it actually has a little slightly less oil to vinegar ratio. I like it a little less oily, a little bit more vinegar, but see, it's that nice silky emulsion because of the mustard. Keeps it all together. Between that and blending it, it will be nice and silky on your tongue. So now we're going to turn this into two different things. The first is I'm going to take out, the most important piece to remember, is split it into two. So you don't forget to do that. There you go. And in door number one, I'm going to add lemon zest.
The zest. It's the zest.
The zest. Oh, the zest. Some fresh thyme. If I was at Jennifer's house, it would be lemon thyme. Unfortunately, it is not.
I have a glamour shot
then,
of 3 kinds of thyme. I just have to say. We'll get to that in a moment.
And then some parsley. I have some fresh parsley that I put in there. I think in the recipe it says herbs at your discretion. I just picked some herbs that looked good at the market. You could put mint. You could put you could really put anything. I probably wouldn't put cilantro in this one, but it would also taste fine. So this is parsley and thyme and just a quick pulse. There you go. And that is one vinaigrette done. That's our lemon vinaigrette.
There's a question if you don't have fresh thyme, how much dried? And I've always sort of run with the general rule of thumb that you use about 1/3 of a dried spice item if you're comparing the measurement to a fresh herb item. Is that what you would say, Allie?
Yeah, I would probably use, the same. I would use just use a sprinkle and like a pinch of thyme of dried. And then here's a fun culinary trick. You can always add more. So taste it, see if it tastes thymy enough to you. And if it does, then great. And maybe start with, like you said, 1/3. And then if it needs to get that bulked up, add some more. Vinaigrette 1, vinaigrette 2 is a peach vinaigrette. So in this cup, I'm going to add some peaches. These are fresh peaches, though I would be using my roasted ones. You could be using my roasted ones. And that is a good reminder for me to check my roasted vegetables and see how they're doing. I'm going to give them another minute or two. But roasted will add sweetness. Fresh will add a zing. So see what you like better. These are going to be fresh and as well as a little bit of orange juice. This is fresh squeezed because I didn't want to buy a tablespoon of orange juice and I like fresh juice if I can use it. So that's fresh orange juice as well as some peaches. And then that is going to get blended up and that makes a peach vinaigrette for our salad. So hold on. This will be loud as that immersion blender works. Sorry.
No, go ahead. If I could talk over it. There was a question about what is the best cooking method to preserve nutrition. So that is a good question. And there are some good general answers. Allie, just jump in whenever you need to talk through what you're saying. Is that okay?
Yep.
Talk through what you're doing. So in general, if you are cooking vegetables, one thing that you could do to preserve your the most amount of vitamins is not to boil them. So I realize I went with the negative first, but that's really an overarching answer. If you boil your vegetables and then pour out that liquid, you're going to be pouring out a lot of the nutrients. So steaming is great, or blanching is great. Sauteing is great. You could roast them as well. But if you do happen to have vegetables in a soup and you're thinking, oh no, I am pouring, I'm wasting my vegetables by having them in a soup. When you eat the soup, you get the vegetables that have boiled out. So that is a safe way to cook them, and you do preserve a lot of those nutrients when you make it into a soup. But I would say steam, blanch, microwave. You could also saute and roast to get a lot of the nutrients out of your vegetable.
So what I have done, and that's a great tip, Jennifer. So what I did here is, because I'm not using the roasted peaches because they're not ready yet, I just put a little bit of honey, a little bit more, tiny bit more into this, because when I tried it, it had a pucker. It was very acidic, probably even a little more acidic than I wanted it to be. So tasted it, and added that, a little bit of that sweetness. If you have the roasted peaches, I think a lot of that's going to be taken care of by the fact that they're that like roasted and more caramelized flavor. So taste it and see what you think. If it needs to be sweeter, add some more peaches, or add a little bit of honey. But I'd prefer to try to add the roasted peaches to really give that natural sugar instead of the added sugar, as we talked about, and increase that nutrient density. So that's going to be like my tip, my trick of how I'm going to try. And actually have some more peaches I might add in here, and blend that in a little bit, so it's less noisy. But I would give that a taste and try it and see what you think. So we have a couple of things moving right now. We have the tempeh and the tempeh and the vegetables coming out of the oven. So my glasses are very steamed up at the moment, but as soon as they are not, I'll show you what these look like. And just a reminder to check your tempeh, as well. So these are hot out of the oven, and you can see how beautiful they look. Don't pick them up with your fingers because you might have feeling in them still. So they're nice and soft, but they have like a little crispiness to them. They've been in here for about, I would say, about 30 minutes or so. You can mix them up. They're soft, but they have that nice like brown. They're all like very sweet at this point. So I just took those out and let those rest. And then also, reminder for myself to check the tempeh, which I'll show you what this looks like. So the tempeh here looks beautiful. It is nice and crispy, and use a spatula to just flip it over. Usually tempeh takes about, 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. Some recipes between 20 and 30. You want the inside cooked, but creamy a little bit. You want the outside crisp. So I just gave that a nice shake, and I'm going to give it probably about 5 more minutes in the oven. And we're going to start on one other thing as we kind of get our final dishes moving.
I might just return really quickly to the vegetable discussion to say, I really should have started this this is a good example of a question that should yield to the good, better, best discussion. Adding vegetables into your diet is a great idea. And so it also makes your foods more nutrient dense. So we want to keep that in mind and focus on getting the vegetables in. If you like them roasted or steamed or sauteed or baked, that means you're using them and getting them into your diet. So those are all good answers. So I did want to stress that as the overarching idea.
Well, that's great, Jennifer. I think that's really where we're going with this good, better, best discussion, right? You gotta make, as I think the favorite phrase, and they use this in the dietary guidelines all the time, but it's so true. I mean, when you have patients, it's got to meet them where they are. It's little changes over time that are really going to make the big difference. So what I'm going to do now is as the tempeh is finishing up, I'm going to make the salad. I'm very excited about making this salad. So this is going to be the carrot top salad here. And what I'm going to do is get a big bowl very simple salad. Very few ingredients, which is lovely because you want to really taste the carrot tops, you know? I think that that's what is so great about this recipe. So in a bowl, thanks. In a bowl, I'm going to put in my favorite spring mix. So a nice big handful of spring mix. You could use arugula. You could use spinach. You could use any type of romaine lettuce that you would like. So I have my lettuce in the bowl. I'm going to take my carrot tops and I'm going to use most of them because I want to use these in this salad, and I'm saving some of the fresh ones for that gremolata, but I'm going to actually give these a taste. I'm going to save about a little bunch and give them a taste and see how bitter the fresh ones are, so I can know whether or not I want to use fresh or I want to use blanched in my gremolata, because you really have to just like try based off of the carrot top. But what I've done is I mixed my carrot tops, my greens together in a bowl. It's starting to look very pretty. All right, so that's getting mixed together. I'm going to, on top of that, add a bit of my roasted peach or peach vinaigrette. So here's my peach vinaigrette. I'm about to plate this. So I would only do this as I'm getting close to plating. So these are more bitter flavors, right? So a little bit of the bitter green top, the bite from the arugula. So I want to make sure that that dressing has the sweetness, has those peaches, has that flavor from the peach, so that it does compensate for some of the bitterness that's coming. So I'm just mixing this together and shake out, I hate to use too much of my hands, but shake out those carrot tops so that they really can, get integrated in the rest of the salad. And because I'm using my hands so much, very important thing is to make sure you're washing them frequently. All right, so I've mixed this together and I'm going to put it on a plate, and I'm getting ready for my tempeh to go next to it. So for right now, the last and most crowning part of this salad. So this has the carrot tops, the arugula spring mix, and on top of it is going to go some roasted cashews. And these are the same cashews that are going to be used in the carrot pasta in a few minutes. So you can see when I put this in a bowl, just how beautiful that is. Green, you have you have the nice veggies, you have the carrot tops. It's really very pretty. So gorgeous. I am going to, sorry you're not here to eat this, Jennifer.
I am too. And I just have to say, it is lunchtime, so this is like a double whammy.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is plate all of our stuff for our tempeh dish, and for our tempeh dish, and for our our tempeh dish and for our salad are done. So here we have our beautiful vegetables, and I'm pulling the tempeh out of the oven right now. You don't want to forget about it, but it's beautiful, and I'll show you it in a second. For those making this in real time, this is pretty much the color you want the tempeh to be, and it is very warm. So this nice golden brown, it's delicious. I'm very excited to eat this. I love tempeh. It's crispy, but it has that creamy on the inside. So everything is done, right? I took my wild rice off. My veggies just came out of the oven. My tempeh is ready to go. And what I did with my wild rice is actually, and I'm gonna go grab it. What I did with my wild rice is actually drained it. So here it is drained, and look at that, it's beautiful. So one of the nice things is it has all these nice separate grains. So what I'm going to do for my plating this experience is I'm going to be using the wild rice, the tempeh, the veggies, all on one plate. And of course, I don't want to use up all my wild rice, because I'm going to be using that in another dish in the green bowl. So here we go. I'm going to put some wild rice down on the plate. It's very pretty. And also look, the color on a white plate is really just fantastic. So wild rice to the side. I'm gonna grab my veggies and my tempeh. Wait until you see how beautiful they look. All right, so vegetables. You have options in plating this. I have done it many ways. You're not gonna use the peaches for this dish. So I'm just scooting those over to the side. Those will be in the grain bowl, so they will get their time in the sun. But yes, but what I've done before is I've mixed them together or I've done them separately, depends on what you want to do. So I'm going to take some of my beets, roasted beets, beautiful, and put them on this plate right on top of the rice. And I'm going to make it kind of this little rainbow experience that you're going to have. Taking some of the carrots, roasted carrots, putting them right next to the beets. Right. And then I'll layer on some tempeh right now.
I do want to say that is beautiful. And if anybody else is plating as well, please do remember to send us your photos or post them to social media. Carrie's phone number and email will come up. I guess cell phone number and email will come up in the chat again in just a moment. So please do share with us your beautiful plates alongside Allie's, because this really is a beautiful dish.
All right, so I just put the tempeh on. Absolutely, we want to see your plates. Mix it up, mix things together. You can do kind of all different ways of plating this. So the last thing I want to do, and I'm going to put the salad on the same plate actually, is I'm going to put a little bit of this yogurt sauce on here. It's thickened up a bit since the last time I tasted it. So if I would probably add a little bit more water to it so that it's a bit more of that like nice drizzle. And this is the thing, if you have thinner yogurt, if you're not using that like thick Faye yogurt that I used, you might not need water, but I just added water so that it could do this drizzle. So I'm going to put this right on top of the veggies and the tempeh, and I'll point that to the camera so you can see it. So next, so this is what this looks like currently. It's a rainbow. It's a little hard to see with the tilt, but the last thing I'm going to do is add in a nice hulking piece, a bit of this salad, this carrot top salad, right next door to it. So that is the dish, 2 dishes from our many. Carrot top salad with the tempeh and the vegetables. So I'm very excited to try it.
I really do. That makes me so happy. It looks delicious. I'm sure it smells amazing in your kitchen.
It smells, I have to say, so the tempeh has that nice spicy smell to it. The roasted vegetables are so, they're so sweet in how they smell. And then you have the acidity from the salad. So I am going to try that, but I want to try to see if we have time to make the carrot pasta. So we're gonna taste everything at the end. So you'll have to wait.
Great.
So if you are making these dishes, I would ask for you to tell us how they taste, because I'm so curious how yours are coming out. I hope they're coming out as great as ours are. So what we're gonna do now, as things get cleaned up, is we're going to go over to the pot here. And do our stove view. So let's talk about this. Go ahead.
Go ahead with the pasta, please.
Oh yeah. So for the pasta, we're going to start with some onion in the pot, and this is going to cook for a couple of minutes and get nice and soft. And while that's cooking, we're going to leave this in for a couple minutes. While that's cooking, we're going to make, we're going to make the green bowl. So you can see that, where we want to get through and make sure that you have the time to try a bunch of these different recipes. So what we're going to do is make the green bowl while that's cooking. So all we need for the green bowl is my kale. You'll notice this is about 4 cups of kale that's shredded. I'm gonna, one of the best things to do with kale, and this is our red wine vinaigrette that we're gonna use for this salad, is just drizzle it on, right? So drizzle on some of this, and then the best part of a salad that you do with kale is massage it, right? So you want to give the kale a nice massage so that it starts to get any of that bitterness out of it, starts to break up how crunchy it is. And so I just poured probably about a tablespoon of the dressing on, and I'm giving it a nice little rub down. And then do that for about a minute. You can do this for any salad that uses kale. Do that for about a minute and then wash your hands. And Jennifer, you feel free to add while I'm washing and cleaning up here a bit.
Yeah, so I will ask one of the questions that was asked. I'm going to respond to it, I should say. There's a question about sorghum, which I love that because I kind of skipped past the discussion of what are the different whole grains, so I could get to the cooking. So this gives me a chance to go back to them. But there are so many kinds of whole grains that are available to us, and sorghum is one of them. And it might be one that you're not familiar with, but there was a time though, and a lot of people, were not and might still not be familiar with quinoa. So I invite everyone to really explore the whole, universe of whole grains. So there's wild rice and brown rice and millet and quinoa and sorghum. They all have different benefits, but basically they all have fiber. They have an amount of protein in them because of that whole grain. Each grain has 3 parts to it: the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. And when you leave them all on the grain, you get to have all of the protein, all the nutrients, all of the fiber, and the starch. When you take all of the outer layers off, you're left with just the starch. But when you have them all, you have protein and fiber, B vitamins, lots of nutrients. And so if you're not familiar with sorghum and haven't made it, give it a try and let us know what you think. Use some social media and let us know that you've given it a try and it maybe replaced your favorite quinoa recipe or brown rice with the sorghum. So yeah, thank you for that question.
Awesome. And actually this is perfect timing. So in my pot now, I have my garlic and onion that's just cooking, and man, does that smell good. And here it is just sweating, right? So I don't want it to get too brown. It's over about a medium heat, so you can turn the stove up and down as you go. I know I'm going quickly because, we're just having so much fun talking that we want to make sure we get through the recipes. But in the other stove, so for those who are cooking along, feel free to message us after with questions. In the other pot here, and I know that it's hard to see what's in there. In the other pot, I have chickpea pasta. So you can use a whole grain pasta for this recipe, about 12 ounces to a pound. I have a chickpea pasta, and I'm not necessarily brand loyal to anything, but I really, really love the chickpea pasta, especially since it adds that element of being gluten-free. And honestly, this pasta that I use that's chickpea really has a very similar taste. It also doesn't take as long to cook, which is lovely. So in this pot now, garlic, onions. What I'm going to add is I'm going to add my carrots that have been roasting, or for those folks who are using fresh carrots, you can also use the fresh ones. But here I'm just going to add my carrots in to here from the sheet pan. So this ends up being about, and don't worry if some beets get in there, that's okay, stragglers. It will still be a
Allie,
beautiful color.
is there oil in that pot? Some of the people are asking.
There was a little tiny bit of oil that I actually had used the leftover from what was on the pan from the roasted veggies. So I would say it's probably like a quarter of a teaspoon of oil, even if that. Mostly also because this is a nonstick pan, so you can do a lot at one time there. So we have the carrots. Awesome. Carrots are in and cooking. We add the carrots. We add the cashews. We add some thyme. We add about 2 cups of stock.
Is there
That's
a
vegetable stock.
There's a question about a substitute for cashews if you're allergic to nuts. I might try a seed. What would you say?
Substitute for cashews. Oh, yeah, I've done it. I've done this with peanuts. I don't know if you're also allergic to peanuts, and have like a similar results. But yeah, I'd have to think about that. I've also done a similar version with coconut milk that works pretty well. Obviously, you'll have a more coconutty flavor, but it does the job of being that creaminess. And then, of course, you can also make this with milk. You know, regular milk instead of a little bit more of the regular milk instead of the cashews. Awesome. So this is going to cook for about 5 minutes. Your recipe said 10, but we want to show you what it's going to look like in the end. I have a little bit of you saw the option had a little bit of miso or Parmesan cheese. I actually have both here to kind of test things out, but I'm going to use the Parmesan cheese. But white miso is a great addition if you want to have a more alternative salt and kind of give this a little bit different of a flavor. So while this is cooking, I'm going to finish up the grain bowl. And all this is going to do is just simmer for about 10 minutes. But we could probably push the time down just because the carrots have been cooked and all you're trying to do is let the cashews get soft. And for those who are cooking along with us, man, your pasta, these chickpea pasta only takes, I would say, probably 6 or so minutes. So it cooks a little faster than your traditional pasta. So I'm going to let those things keep cooking and finish up the grain bowl and get this nice and plated. So to plate my grain bowl, my warm grain bowl, which is delicious, we're going to do several things here. I have my peaches that have been roasted. I have the beets that have been cooked. Whoop, they're anxious to get plated. I have the rice, some wild rice. And I also have some cheese here. So what we're going to do is in my bowl, and you can start really in any order you want, but I'm going to add in the kale in a bowl. And remember, don't forget about that. Don't forget about your pasta. That is one that I do that can happen. Add in your rice. Right. Scoop of rice. And then I typically like to layer things very much. So I'm going to do a nice layer of these beets. A layer of these roasted peaches. Gorgeous and so delicious. Look at that. So good. Roasted peaches.
There's a question about roasting thawed frozen fruit, which, I haven't had a super success with roasting frozen fruit. I'm wondering what you think about that.
You could. I think it would be hard. Flavor-wise, it would work. I think texturally, that would be a challenge just because it's going to have like kind of a mushier texture. Nice. But I think it's definitely a possibility. It's not like out of the realm of an option. Right? Some cheese. And Jennifer, I'll let you drool over this and talk for a second while I drain our pasta, which is done. Because this, ladies and gentlemen, is our grain bowl. And look at that.
It looks amazing. Truly amazing. I love it. I want to eat that for lunch immediately. So I do want to talk about for a moment, there was a question about honey. What kind of honey, how much sugar is in honey? There's lots of honey questions. And I welcome them because there's anecdotally a lot of really amazing information about honey, and that maybe claims, maybe they're not exactly able to be proven. That doesn't, there's just a lot out there about honey, and they're wondering which honey to choose and all of that. So first and foremost, your body recognizes sugar as sugar, whether it comes in as honey or high fructose corn syrup or sugar in the raw or brown sugar or sugar. Your body digests it as sugar. And so there's really no difference in how it gets processed once it gets broken down into glucose. However, I do want to tell you, somebody was asking how much sugar is in honey. So there generally is 17 grams of sugar in 1 tablespoon of honey. So that's how you count that. And then the question is, what kind of honey? So as a cancer dietitian, for me, there's lots of chatter in our listservs about honey being really helpful and beneficial for patients who are going through radiation to the head and neck, and that there's a specific kind of honey that can really reduce the symptoms. It's very hard to find. So do I recommend that honey to my patients? Not really, unless I really think that they can get it. It's expensive and difficult to find. So that is called Manuka honey, and it is from New Zealand, and it's really difficult to find in the US, very expensive. And does it offer so many different benefits than other honey? It's really hard to prove. I can't clinically make any claims to that. So if you would like to use honey as a coating, as something that makes you feel good, I would say any kind of honey. You know, the bees that are getting the pollen from different parts of the country are making it taste different because it's the terroir, it's the flavor from where they are. So the different pollen that's available will flavor the honey. So really, this is a question to every home cook: is what do you love? And use that. As with any sugar, you want to use it sparingly, but honey does have some helpful properties in lots of ways. Anybody who's ever had a sore throat knows that it feels good, but it is an added sugar. So use the one that makes you happy in smaller amounts. So that's the question about honey. Let's see, there's a question. Oh, are you ready? Yeah, good.
I am going to give this pasta I'm going to give this sauce about 1 more minute, but then, yeah, I think we're good to go. So maybe 1 more question.
Okay, great. Let me see. There was a question about parboiling, the options, the benefits, the disadvantages. In general, if you're going to parboil something and then go back and finish cooking it, and that means you're going to eat more of it, especially if it's a vegetable or a fruit, I think it's a great idea. Some of those grains that you find that are whole grains, like rice, brown rice, that could get cooked really quickly once you get it home. The reason is because, hopefully, the better reason is that it's been parboiled. The other reason could be that maybe some of the fiber was taken out. So you do want to check your nutrition facts label and make sure that it is a whole grain. But anything that gets your food that's healthy and making your food more nutrient dense and gets you there a little faster, so you parboil it and then finish cooking it later, that's a great option. Yeah.
Okay, Jennifer, we're ready. Okay, so the one thing I'm going to do now is actually immersion blend my recipe here. So what you could do is, if you had a blender, so here's some things that have happened since we've tuned in. So I have the pasta is done, cooked and drained. Here we go, very nice. It's going to get blended with its lovely sauce. So Carrie, if you can, would you mind going back to the view of the stove, please? Okay, so I think we're on the view of the stove. Awesome. So what we're gonna do now, this has been cooking for, I'm gonna say it's been cooking for 10 minutes, because if we had a little bit more time, I'd love for it to get a little softer. So what we're gonna do is add in the milk and blend it up. So what are we trying to accomplish with this? A nice creamy sauce that, if you had a nuclear powered stick blender, would come together faster. And if you had a regular blender, would come together even faster. Oops. So you have carrots in here, you have the cashews, and Jennifer, if you'd look for 1 or 2 other questions, I'm going to just blend this a little bit more, and then I think we'll be ready to put it on the pasta.
Absolutely, happy to do that. So there's a question about seitan. Can you substitute seitan for tempeh? So I want to explain what seitan is. It is a vegan source, a vegan protein source. It varies from tofu and tempeh in that it's made from wheat gluten instead of from soy. So tofu and tempeh are soy products. Seitan is wheat gluten. So you isolate the gluten from the wheat, which removes the starch and the bran, and you're left with seitan. And so that's what it is. It often can pass for meat because it's a little bit more savory. It is high in protein, lower in carbs than tofu or tempeh. So that's what it is. If anyone has used it, I'd love to hear your comments in the box. But you can usually substitute seitan for meat in recipes using a one-to-one substitution. And so you could use it, for example, like a crumble in a pasta sauce.
Yum. I love seitan. I've made it before. It's pretty fun. Definitely not good if you're gluten-free, but still delicious. Okay, well this, so what I've done to the carrot sauce here is that, we want to let it cook down a little bit, get nice and creamy. I added the full 2 cups of carrots. If you want to let it cook a little bit more, if it's, and this is a little easier, I have to say, if you have a full blender, like I do at home, to get it really creamy and delicious. So there we go. So you can see it's really starting to thicken up, and you want it to be nice and creamy and delicious. And it should look very similar to a cheese sauce. I believe I'm flinging cheese. I believe I'm flinging things everywhere right now, but that's some of the fun of being in the kitchen, right? So you can see it. There we go. It's this nice sauce. It's getting nice and creamy. I'm just letting it blend and thicken. And all that is it's the milk and the cashews that have blended together in kind of this like lower calorie, less hearty, not less hearty, but less, less heavy of a cheese sauce. So I'm going to take that off the stove. And what this also has in it, you can see it's very hot. What this also has in it is I also just threw some Parmesan cheese in it. I'm using that as a little bit of salt, as salt that is not salt, so that I need to put less salt in it in and of itself. Oops, that's a hot pot, man. All right, so you can smell it. It smells fresh and delicious. It's really getting really creamy now. And if you do have a chance to throw this in a blender or to spend a little bit more time blending it, it will get even creamier as well. You can just see me really spending the time to blend up those carrots, blend up those cashews, and look, so there we go. That looks much more like a typical cheese sauce that has the base of that roux and the butter and all of the things that make it taste delicious that we don't necessarily want to have all the time. So why this is so great is that we just swapped out this rich cheese sauce with a much lighter version that also has the nutrient density from the cashews and from that as well. So now we're just going to plate this. So here is my pot. Caution, it is also a little warm. So going back to my cutting board, and we're going to move this salad, and we'll show you the full pan of all of these dishes. So here we have the sauce. What I'm going to do, and what's very important, is just give this a taste. It has no salt or pepper in it at this point. Yum. Wow. Well, it's really good. All right. So some pepper. I'm going to use a tiny bit of salt, but honestly, it doesn't really need that much. And then just tasting this, I think what would be really delicious is if it had a little bit of citrus in it, a little bit of lemon. This is me just like testing things out. So I'm just going to put a little squeeze of lemon in it as well. For that gremolata, what you would do for the gremolata on top is take the carrot tops that have been chopped and fresh, mix them with some garlic, some lemon, mix that up. Don't use your tasting spoon if you're going to feed this to other people. So there's that nice gremolata. It's going to go on top with the panko. So clean off your cutting board. Get this ready for plating. Beautiful bowl. What we're going to do is take our pasta into the pot. By pot, I mean bowl. And actually, you know what? I really want to give this a nice mix. So I'm going to mix it in another bowl. There we go. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I want to make this really integrated, nice and delicious. So you magic hands helping me out here. It's wonderful. I need one of these in my kitchen all the time. So I'm going to take my sauce and pour it over my pasta and just, you know, start with a little, then you can dump the whole thing. Last thing you want is like soupy pasta. So you mix this up. Wow. Does that look like mac and cheese or what? So mix that together. Yum. Might even pour a little bit more on, but I think that looks pretty good. Put this right in the bowl. It smells great. Oh my gosh. When it's not fogging up my glasses, it smells like heaven. Okay, here we go. Beautiful. My gremolata, which is just those carrot tops, some garlic, some lemon. Put that right on top. And I'm going to sprinkle it with the last and certainly not least ingredient, which I love, our toasted panko. All right, so let's have you all get a look at this.
That is beautiful. I want to tell you, I love how that looks. I know how healthy it is. It is nutrient dense. It's delicious. It's interesting. It's showing what's growing in the gardens right now. I just love what you've made today. So I want to thank you. Because we've been chatting so much, we did not get a chance to answer everybody's questions, but I think we got to a lot of them. But I do want to thank everyone for all of your very active participation in the chat and the questions.
Great job, everybody. I just wanted to go ahead, oh, not that, and share my screen with the beautiful creations that we were getting throughout this time.